Fletcher a minute. She had stepped away.
Okay. I'm back.
Awesome.
All right, my name is Angie Juzang. I am with the Legacy Business League. It is a minority chamber of commerce. We have built a partnership with Hancock Whitney, and we're facilitating grant writing workshops. Our goal is to ensure that organizations, particularly those that are minority based, are successful, and nonprofits obviously are part of that, that initiative. So about 2 weeks ago, we kicked off a series. We knew that it was going to be more information than we can probably get into even a 3 to 4 hour period. So we've done a series of workshops. We covered a lot of ground the last time. We heard from the panelists that you see here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And the way we'll do it today is that Dr. Betty Fletcher will review some of the many slides that she has, and that she gives like a multi-day workshop, and she's here today to cram it into an hour and a half. But we're going to have intermittent comments from the various panelists. She also has some interactive slides. Miss Sarah Taylor, who joined us last time, is going to have to cut out just a little early, so we hope that we'll be able to hear some of her insights before she has to do that. So before we get really started and rolling, let's open it up to Anthony Montgomery, who is our series sponsor. And
good morning.
This is his brainchild.
Thank you, Miss Angie. Good morning. And thank you all for joining us today for another Hancock Whitney sponsored virtual event. I'm Anthony Montgomery, Senior Vice President and Director of Community Development for Hancock Whitney Bank. First, I'd like to thank all of our expert panelists and the Legacy Business League for working together to bring you this excellent 3-part series. Today is part 2 of the 3-part series, a comprehensive grant writing roundtable workshop with the expert. Today, we will focus on developing achievable program outcomes featuring Dr. Betty Fletcher Ward. Remember, I told you over the last several years, as I've visited several community-based organizations, you always heard them ask, how can we achieve or get more funding? How can I find out more information about grant programs? What can I do to increase our chances for winning a grant? Well, today we're going to try to start to answer even more of those questions as Dr. Fletcher does a deep dive into developing achievable program outcomes. During this series, we hope to continue to provide you with helpful information to make your grant applications more impactful as you share and tell your story. Today, I will again serve as moderator from a reviewer's perspective. I will be monitoring the Q&A box for questions, and we hope to allow time at the end of each portion for interactive discussions. So with that, I'll kick it back over to Ms. Angie, and we'll start with introductions. Actually, we'll kick it over to Ms. LaCarsha, and we'll go with Ms. LaCarsha, Ms. Sarah, and we'll go to Kiva and end up with Dr. Fletcher as she goes into her presentation. Thank you all, and we're looking forward to an exciting presentation today.
Fantastic. Good morning. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Angie. Good morning. My name is LaCarsha Babers, and I am the Community Development Officer for Hancock Whitney Bank. As I mentioned on our first grant writing call or webinar, I've been in banking for over 21 years. And here at Hancock Whitney Bank, our mission is to help people achieve their financial goals and dreams. And I believe that Hancock Whitney Bank, we have several rewarding departments, but Hancock Whitney has a community development, community affairs department, and I feel that it's one of the most rewarding departments that we have, simply because it gives us an opportunity to give back into the communities in which we serve. We are able to have an effort to improve the lives of those individuals in the community. As a community development officer, my role here is to strengthen relationships with community partners whose primary mission involves affordable housing, economic development, community development services to low to moderate income individuals, as well as revitalization and stabilization. I'm looking forward to being a part of the panelists, and I am one of the administrators for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas grant writing. So please feel free, if you have questions throughout the grant writing webinar, to put those questions into the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer those. Again, I'm LaCarsha Babers, the Community Development Officer for Hancock Whitney Bank, and I'm looking forward to the webinar.
Ms. Sarah?
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name's Sarah Taylor. I'm principal with Impact Strategies Consulting. I've worked inside and external to nonprofits for the last 20 plus years, consulting the last 15 or so, and here to tell you a little bit about that or answer any questions. My specialty is federal grants, but I've also worked on the foundation side a lot, and I look forward to sharing with the panel.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started with Dr. Fletcher and let some of the panelists introduce themselves later as they come online. Dr. Fletcher, you are going to go ahead and take it away. We don't want to take any more time away from what you have to tell us today.
Thank you so very much, Angie. Good morning to everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you and to be a part of this webinar. Please know I'm with Professional Associates, Inc. Here in the metro area of Jackson. And for over, let me say 50 years, I have been doing research, evaluation, grant writing, strategic planning, etc. Now, and my assignment today is to try to, again, condense down something that I usually do in 2 days. So you're gonna have to bear with me. I hope you got a lot of patience as we do this for the first time virtually. Let me apologize to fellow presenters on the line and panelists for this slide being up here. But I'm afraid if I take it down, I may not be able to get back up as promptly because I am technologically challenged. But nevertheless, we're gonna get through this today. What I'm gonna endeavor to do is in an accelerated fashion to walk you through several areas of grant writing, okay, that are critical when you're trying to develop a proposal. We'll not deal with all of the topics and issues. It is definitely compacted. We go talk about problem identification real quick. Then we're gonna try to practice doing a goal and objective. So please get you a piece of paper to write on or type into your slide document. Please understand one item as we go through this. What you see come up on my slide, on my screen, may not be identical to what you have. Let me explain that. I am working from my master file that I'm currently developing for a really publication, which is the master. I have gone through and pulled out some slides that Angie has shared with you as your handout. They're the same, only I have more slides than you have. So don't say, oh, I don't have that one. You probably don't. I have 150. You don't have 150.
Dr. Fletcher, I've not shared anything with anybody yet. So what I can do is after this, I'll send it out to the people that attended.
Very well then. Okay, so I have your undivided attention and you will get your handout afterwards. That's fine, Angie. Now, am I to go forward at this point and start the process?
Yes, ma'am. You can just hit your down arrow and that'll take you to your next slide.
Please know I'm gonna, along the process, and I invite the other panelists. This is learn together kind of experience. So please feel free to inject as we go through this process, share your thoughts, your experiences, and please know, audience, you don't learn how to write a proposal by listening to some old lady on a webinar. You learn to write a proposal by putting finger to keyboard, pencil to pad, practicing, doing it, making errors, changing it, and doing over again. So I encourage you to think of it that way. And I'm looking forward to our other panelists to just sort of plugging in, giving input as we go through this process, and so that we come out of this hopefully with a collective voice about some of the things you can do in order to be successful. The first thing I want to talk about is some things you do before you put your pencil to paper. And we touched on these the last time. First of all, you need to give some thought to the development of fund development plan. Nothing complicated about that. What are you good at doing what is your target area and who is funding similar work. And so you aren't looking for a needle in a haystack. You have a very focused plan that I'm going to pursue funding in, say, youth development, or I'm going to pursue funding in housing, or what our capacity building, whatever the case might be. Decide what your niche is. And then you move to identifying potential funders in that specific area. How do you do that? You go on the internet and you Google, you talk to other individuals, you look at many resources out there, and you will decide where to look based on where you think the most of those resources are. Whether they be a federal program, you go to grants.gov. Grants.gov has everything in terms of federal funding. You just got to learn how to navigate through all of those opportunities and find what you're looking for. Now, that's a week-long workshop just to figure out how to move through the government's grants.gov website. And the other thing is that you use every opportunity that you have to connect with funders. You may not know any. That's okay. You may know somebody who know one. And maybe they can help you introduce yourself or introduce your work, or you look for an opportunity if they are conducting some kind of webinar or capacity building activity. Be in the audience, look for an opportunity to connect with them and begin to have a conversation. That is particularly true in the private sector in terms of funding. I'm working with a client now in another state. They want to pursue funding for a particular foundation in their state. I don't know anyone. So I found a friend of mine who knew someone at that foundation. And guess what? We have finally connected. It's taken us about 3 or 4 months to do that. But I've been able to connect with the funder, and their response was, we want to hear more about this. And so I'm in the door now in terms of beginning to pursue the funding. The other one is that you build relationship. And you build relationship with the idea that you have something to offer. As I said before, I approach it from the perspective that I have some capacity and I work with the community with a need, and somebody else has the resources. How can we bring all three of those together and have a successful relationship? So those are the things you just need to mentally think about, begin to frame, act on before you actually start writing a proposal. Then you're off and running in terms of the actual writing. One of the things you want to remember when you're doing that is to be reader friendly. What does that mean? I used to tell folks, for instance, I'm on a review for an international foundation. They are going to send me 5 proposals that I got to read and review in a week or so. Now, I got to get through each one of those proposals and read it according to their criteria. And I'm probably going to do that when I'm get through with all of my webinars, like for Hancock Bank and everything else. I'm going to start it, given my lifestyle, at maybe 8 o'clock tonight. You all, I'm going to fall asleep in the process. And I say that not to be facetious, but to make the point. You got to write that proposal knowing the person that's reading it does not know you, not deeply interested in the topic, at least for your specific community, but you got to read it, write it in a way that you, every once in a while, they will brighten their eyes up and say, oh, that's interesting. You want it to be reader friendly. You want it to be easy to read. So important. The second thing is that you must address the RFP, request for proposals. Now they call them notice of awards, NOAs, a lot of acronyms. But you gotta follow their criteria literally to the T. And they go tell you what those criteria are. You gotta follow them whether you want to or not. If they say address, whatever area, quality, inclusion, equity, you say, I don't know anything about that. Well, you need to find out something about it so that you can write to it. In so many instances, I have read proposals where individuals just didn't say anything about a particular section. For instance, we go talk about sustainability. That's one that our small nonprofits oftentimes do not address. And my policy is say something rather than nothing, because that way you give the reader something to work with and to give you points. But if you don't put anything there, the only point you can get is a 0. So you want to be mindful, never leave anything unaddressed. And it might be appropriate in some instances to say, this is an area where we are building our strength and that we are developing in, and you give them examples of what you're doing to develop your capacity in that area you might not be strong in. The other one is to run out and find you a partner who is stronger in that area than you are, and say, we are collaborating with this organization who has a tremendous capacity in that area. That's excellent. So, but remember, you want to address all of the criteria in that proposed, if the RFP that they're going to give you. Foundations may have a shorter RFP. Government will have a much longer document. I mentioned in the last session, I was reading one that was 84 pages. So you got to be able to be attentive to that. Next, you're going to have to adhere to the format. If they said 1-inch margin at the top and 1-inch margin at the bottom, that's what we do. If they said 25 pages, do not give them 25 pages and 3 additional lines on 26. Because they often tell, some funders tell reviewers, you can stop reading on page 25. I don't care what you put on the rest of the pages. Now, some of us go read it anyway because we want to be as helpful as we can. But if they said 25 pages, give them 25 pages. Don't give them more than 25 pages. You may write less than 25 pages. But if the funder tells me that we told them not to exceed 25 pages and you submit a proposal with 10 pages, I'm gonna look at that and say, what's going on here? Because the assumption has been made that minimally you need 25 pages to tell your story. Now, those are some of just the logistics, the semantics, the technical aspects of the grant writing process. And I'm gonna move in a minute to the actual proposal components, but I wanna deal with this and then I'm gonna stop for question and answers before I get into the meats of objectives and all of those things, your plan and your budget and your logic model. I'm giving every proposal, even if they don't ask for it, you should give them an abstract. But you see, I have here abstract summary, because the abstract, which could serve as your introduction, is the last thing that you write. Do not write your abstract at the beginning. At least that doesn't work for me, because by the time I get through writing, I will have added some things I may not have thought about at the beginning. So I write that abstract last. That's the last thing I write. You want it to be clear. You want it to be concise. Don't ramble on and on. Any abstract that's more than 1 or 2 pages, and they will usually give you page limitations. Anything I say over 2 pages, you need to figure out another way to write that. It's a brief summary of the entire proposal without all of the wonderful details. You identify who you are as the applicant. We've been in this business for X number of years and have demonstrated success in many areas. One sentence, I'm saying one sentence, that's how I do it. You might need 2 sentences or 3, but be brief, that's the goal. You want to speak about your credibility. We are a credible organization and you have a supportive constituency, etc. The problem in this community is the lack of access to childcare for working mothers. That would be an example of a problem statement. But you don't have to, and it manifests itself in the form of mothers being unable to retain a job, say. I'm using that as an example. Also, you will have 1 or 2 sentences about your objectives, 1 or 2 sentences about your method, and we're going to talk about all these in a little bit, so you don't have to try and remember them all. 1 or 2 sentences on your method and your approach. That means what are you planning on delivering? What are you going to do? That's a method. That's your approach. People use different terms to explain that. And then you're going to have your budget. Your budget. You provide a budget that your total budget, including the funds provided by you, the applicant, and other sources. And again, we'll talk about that later. But you want, if you're going to have to match, you surely have to do that. But even if you don't have to match and you got a partner that's going to donate some dollars, and if it's feasible to treat it as in kind, and you can put a dollar value on it very easily, defensible, reasonable, then it's appropriate to include it in your proposal and point that out in your budget when you are preparing it. Now, what I like to do is start with our problem statement, but just what I've covered thus far. Angie, let me take 2 or 3 minutes to see if there are any questions, any feedback, any panelists want to add anything thus far.
Ms. Sarah?
Dr. Fletcher, you made a great point that I would like to touch on from a reviewer's perspective. When you were talking about scoring and making sure that they put a point or something specific, a quick point. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It could be a quick sentence. But as I review over these, I'm going to touch on 2 things that are on the scores or the reviewer's application. And we scored these from 1 to 10, with 1 being low, 10 being the maximum points. One of the questions is, does this project provide a unique and effective method to support the bank's community reinvestment goals? You will score 1 to 10 in that bucket. And when you're thinking about community reinvestment, it's economic development, revitalization or stabilization, community service, and affordable housing. Now, there's an array of things that fall under each of those. Another one of the reviewer's questions are resources currently dedicated to this project? So even if it's just a quick point, let us know what those resources are for sustainability. And just one last one. Does this organization partner with other nonprofits or community organizations to implement the programs? Has the organization established a meaningful and lasting relationship with 1 or more of these community partners? So collaborating with other organizations to try to have a broader impact and reach more clients. These are all things that will be scored on that grant application by the reviewer. And as Dr. Fletcher said, this reviewer is going to be reviewing several grant applications. So you want to make sure that you have something that's going to be eye-catching or a sentence that jumps out and makes them want to reread those. And I think when I score someone high, it's because I went back and had to reread a paragraph to say, that was a good point right there. So I'll ask Ms. Sarah if she wants to elaborate on that as well.
I thought that was great. And Dr. Fletcher, you're probably going to get to this, but she spoke to just the criticality of having partners. And I've worked for some nonprofits that come really with no partners, and they are sort of operating in a silo. And I think it's really, really important. And I'm sure we're getting to this, if not today, then maybe one of the future panels, but documenting your partnerships through MOUs, making sure everybody's clear on the expectations. In most cases, no money is changing hands. You're just really using your overarching missions and budget alignment to accomplish your goals kind of in a better way together. Maybe if you could speak to how to, locate some of these partners, how to document those partnerships, and how to make sure everybody's kind of coming to the table with the same idea about how to move forward. Again, I know that's not the topic for today, but I find that's where a lot of proposals kind of go off the rails. People just aren't really sure how to make that happen.
Okay, I think that's excellent feedback, and I'm going to work up and start with Sarah's comment. And let me give you an example. Right now, I'm working with a client that 3 months ago, I said, you need to have a collaborative. You need some partners. And they didn't understand how to do that. So I put on paper, here are some partners that I have researched your community, your school district, your town, and you have a Boys and Girls Club. This is a school district, the client. And I said, you need partners with, Boys and Girls Club. You need the mayor's office on board with you. You need the faith community on board with you. You need the artists in the community on board. And the parents, please, you can't do it without the parents. You need to be able to say you got the mental health community on board, the public library system. All of these partners are resources right around us. And we need to be able to engage with them and partner with them. They may not have any money to bring to the table, but that's okay. They bring their expertise, their knowledge, their contribution, and funders value that. If you do not choose to collaborate, you are really underestimating the capacity that you have for a strong collaborative. So please, and I drew him a little diagram. Here are all these people that can be your partners right there in your community. I've never set foot in that community, but I was able to identify all of these really on the internet. Now you all need to go out and have a virtual meeting and start talking to each other about how we can support the children in this community. Guess what? They hadn't gotten around to doing that yet. And I got a call just last week saying, oh, we need to go after this 21st century learning center. We know about 21st century learning centers. Guess what? They require you to have partners. And the deadline is going to be here in a couple of weeks, but they have not established the partnerships. And so you put your writer in the position of writing a proposal that said, yes, we have a collaboration that's been in place 2 weeks. It surely would sound better if you said, we have a long-standing collaborative relationship with partners in our community, such as. So, Sarah, you're so right. And it's not rocket science. It's people that you're probably already interacting with and working with. You're sharing resources, you're referring people. That's collaboration. That's partnering. And I encourage you to look for ways for highlighting that. On Anthony's comment, the mission of the bank program is unique and effective. Those two terms jumped out at me because you know what? My first sentence is going to be, this is a very unique and effective approach because I'm using their words to describe my program. That's important. We have dedicated resources, even in your limited resource, to make sure that we provide housing assistance in the following area, whatever that might be. So those things are very important. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section, and I surely want to hear from some of the participants as our audience as well. If I don't, I'll call on you in a few minutes. Let's talk about the problem statement very quickly, and then we're going to move to objectives and your project approach. Your problem statement. Poverty is the major social issue in our community. That's a statement about a problem in your community. And it is manifest in the form of low paying jobs or no jobs. It is exacerbated by a lack of transportation and unemployment, because individuals lack transportation and they do not have public transportation to get to their job. You're describing your problem, the nature and the extent of the problem. Again, an example, we responded to a proposal and they said you must have your school district must be 33% have students, 33% of whom are poverty stricken. Well, we went to the census data like they told us, and we determined that about 45% of those children were actually poverty stricken. But when we looked at state data, we discovered 99% of those children were either on some public assistance, either they were receiving TANF or they were having other needs in their families. And we went from 30-some to 40-some to 99% of those children could be classified as poverty stricken. That's the kind of effort we have to put forward to describe those that we serve. Use the data. There's no excuse now. You go do census quick facts ought to be your best friend if you're writing proposals to help you describe your community. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do that. Go to quickfacts.gov, US Census Quick Facts. That's what it is. US Census Quick Facts. And it will give, you can type in your state, your city, and it will give you data on your city, population data. You can use charts and graphs if it is appropriate and acceptable. Some grantees might tell you, funders might tell you, we don't want that, but most of them will be pleased to have tables, etc. Please be specific and not general, and endeavor to be persuasive in terms of describing the problem. We're working on some stuff on equity right now. And people are saying, well, I don't know how to write on equity. As I said before, and we can talk about this more later, is that you already doing equity. If you're doing housing, if you're doing youth leadership development, if you're doing healthcare for low-income communities, if you're doing childcare for low-income communities, you're doing equity. Because equity is to make sure that all individuals have access, unabridged access to the opportunities and the resources that will allow them to be successful. And that's a way of approaching that one. But it is important for you to describe your problem in terms of, people want you to quantify. In the age of tech information, they want quantity. Quantify your data. The problem must address the problem and not the symptoms. It must address the problem. The problem is in this community is unemployment. That is a problem in our community. And you talk about the unemployment data, and not the symptoms. Children, yes, they are, maybe there's violence and crime in the community, but if you want to fix that problem, fix that situation, you got to address the core problem, which is the lack of employment, and make sure you are able to distinguish the problem from the symptoms of the problem. You should discuss consequences. Because of unemployment, we have high crime rates, lack of access to health care, et cetera, et cetera. People are not staying home because they don't want to work. They stay at home either because they lack some training, or they lack the skill set needed, or they really need some help connecting with those resources, et cetera. And you should not at this point discuss the solution. You go get to that in your approach. Right now, you're trying to paint a picture of what the problem is. Again, be clear, be concise, not vague and ambiguous. You ought to be able to, when I read your problem statement, I ought to know what the problem is. Where does it exist? Does it exist in your county, or whatever the target area is that you're attempting to serve? Who is affected by it? Who are the people that are affected by the problem? It might be people who live out in the rural area. It might be children from communities of color, Black and brown children. It might be, when does it occur? When is this problem at its height? And to what degree is it felt? When people do not have adequate housing, how is that manifest in their lives? But you want to keep your focus on addressing the problem and then talking about the consequences, etc. And we're going to practice doing this. This is our first opportunity to be interactive. A problem statement, as I've just read, what is the problem? I'm going to give you an example here, and I want you to think about somebody, some brave soul in the audience will give us a response. What is the problem? For this example is decline in quality of education. Where does the problem exist? In my elementary school. Who is affected by the problem? 1,000 pupils, students attending my school. How do you know that's a problem? How is the problem documented? Take state test scores for past 5 years. To what degree or extent is the problem felt? The children are having low ratings on national academic scores. Now, I hope everyone see the answer to that question. Each question as I go down that example. Now let's put all 5 of those pieces together in one coherent sentence that becomes a thesis for your problem statement. And then you develop it from there. Your problem identification statement is, according to 2021 state scores, there has been a decline in the quality of education of 1,000 pupils in my elementary school district, as evidenced by low ratings on national academic scores over 5 years. Would you open up your unmute and somebody respond to this? Now you take your example and put it over there in that column and see if you can do the same thing.
Dr. Fletcher, I'm not sure if the participants can unmute. I think Miss Angie may have to do that.
Yes, I'm looking to see now. Carmelita, do me a favor and see if you can unmute yourself. I'm gonna give you an allow to talk. That work?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Okay. So if there's anybody else that wants to be able to talk, just raise your hand or put yourself in the chat and say, I'd like to talk, but I'm going to go through and just start unmuting everybody. But do you have anything you want to say? Any feedback about what Dr. Fletcher said? It was either you or Leach I was gonna call in because I don't recognize anybody else, but I can
No.
okay.
Okay, I need to hear, is this helpful? Does this example make sense to you? Because if it doesn't, I'm defeating the purpose here.
Yes, this example makes sense to me.
Okay. Now, this will be in the slides that Angie will share with you afterwards. And remember, I said earlier, you don't learn to do this by sitting here listening and somebody talk about it. You got to take your problem, housing. What is the problem? The lack of adequate housing. Where does that problem exist? In East Biloxi, Mississippi. Who is affected by the problem? Approximately 500 low-income families. How do you know that? As evidenced by census data. To what degree does it exist? The families have lack of adequacy of whatever. And again, based on census data. What you're trying to do is say, this is the problem. This is where it's located. These are the people that are affected by it. The reason I know this because I've seen the data on it. That's all. That's your general problem statement, and you develop it from there. Questions or comments?
Could someone else do me a favor? There we go. Miss Wendy, yes. I tried, I think I'm helped everybody unmute, but if I haven't, again, put it in the chat, please. I'm here, Wendy. Miss Wendy, you have something to say? I see where you unmuted yourself.
I got a request. Good morning. I got a request to unmute, so I unmuted.
Okay. I'm providing that to everybody in the event somebody wants to speak up and say something. So Dr. Fletcher's asking for feedback. She wants to make sure that you all are getting what you need. Even if you put it in the chat, just say, yes, this is good. No, I need more, and what you need. Because we want this to be interactive. Okay.
Especially the comments about laying everything out and Anthony's.
You're going in and out, Carmelita.
I'm seeing a few comments that hits the chat box that says, yes, this is good. This is very helpful. Yes, this is good. So I'm seeing a lot of comments there. So we're on the right track.
Very well.
Angie,
Okay.
Angie,
Yes.
this is Angela Griffin.
Hello.
If you called to me earlier, I apologize. I had to step away to answer a call, and I don't know if Dr. Fletcher touched on this or if this is something that's coming up a little later, but I wanted to ask specifically as it relates to is it appropriate to put in the proposal when you're hiring individuals such as a grant writer to write grants? And if so, is there a certain percentage that grant writers would receive? Is that appropriate to put in your grant proposal?
Okay. Hi, Angela. How are you doing? First of all, you got two questions here. Do you put it in?
Yeah.
Put it in your proposal? I would say absolutely not.
Okay.
Unless there is some logical reason to put that in.
Okay.
How you cost for those services, that's a larger issue. There are several models out there, and we can talk a little bit more about that, Angela, when we get to the budget. But the bottom line is, remember this: if you are applying for federal funding, I'm virtually sure, I'm almost 100%, federal agencies are not going to, that's an unallowable cost.
Okay.
And it's called pre-award cost. Somebody writing a proposal for you is a pre-award cost. So you cannot write into the budget to say, when y'all fund me, I'm gonna take X number of dollars here and pay Dr. Fletcher for writing the proposal. You can't do that. Now, what you can do is find the dollars from other sources. Say you have donated money or other funds that you can pay that grant writer with. But I don't see any circumstance. I've never had a situation where you needed to put that in the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
Okay. No other questions? Moving right along. Let's talk about goals and objectives. And this is truly a longer, a need for a longer discussion. But the first thing, what I experienced in reviewing grants is people write this problem statement, and they lay it out pretty well. And then they start talking about goals and objectives. You're writing about housing problems. And then you decide you go write goals and objectives about something totally unrelated to that. There might be, you know, the important thing to remember is your objectives should flow out of your problem. If you are writing a proposal about a decline in educational system, the example we just used, your objectives ought to be about improving students' academic performance. You could have an objective about parental engagement. You might need an objective about improving the school climate, but it ought to be related to the problem you just got through talking about. If you're writing a proposal to, and the example I always use for myself, and please receive it in that vein, is about weight reduction. If you are writing a proposal and you talk about the problem of being overweight, and then you get to the objectives and you said, my objective is to get a new hairstyle, but that's not connected. So my point is, your problem statement is an expression of a negative situation or stated in negative terms. The objective is the opposite of that. It is a statement of a desirable situation to be achieved. It is intended to correct the problem. You see the connection? We got this situation here. Somebody's overweight, and the solution is to get to the gym and push back from the table. So I write two objectives, one about pushing back from the table and one about going to the gym. And I get specific with it. As I indicated under objectives, I gotta be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. Y'all have heard about that before. It's called SMART. Okay, now people get goals and objectives confused. The goal is a broadly defined solution to the problem. And the objective is derived from a goal, and it has the same intention as the goal, but it's more specific. I want to be beautiful and fine as a result of losing weight. And I'm being facetious, but I'm trying to make a point. In my objectives, I am going to go on a 1,500 calorie diet and go to the gym for at least 1 hour, 5 times a week. The latter is the what? The objective. The former is the goal. They are both related. One is general, one is specific. Objectives usually, not every time, but usually start with the word to. Let me try and again, the goal is a broad statement of what you want to accomplish, and a general description of a desired impact. Is often timeless. Examples. These are examples of goals. To eliminate highway fatalities. We will never eliminate all highway fatalities. But you know, that's the vision. That's where you want to go. To end poverty. That's a goal, but it's unrealistic to think that you go write a proposal for 1 year funding and eliminate poverty. It's too general. To create, and I used to see these all the time, to create a drug-free community. That's not an objective. You can have a goal of creating a drug-free community, but you probably won't be completely drug-free because we still gonna have to take our medicine, et cetera, et cetera. But I hope you're getting the point here. So what do? I focus on those objectives. They ought to be specific. They ought to be measurable. That means you got to have a number somewhere in there. I'll be able to count something in that objective. Your objective has to be attainable, and I'm going to talk about each one of these. It has to be relevant, and it has to be time limited. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time limited. What does all that mean? When you say you got a specific one, it's clear about what, where, when, and how the situation will be changed. You don't have to write this down because it's in the slides that you're going to get. Measurable means you are able to quantify the target. We will service 1,000 students the first year, 1,500 the second year, and 2,000 the third year. You want to be able to measure whatever it is that you have as an objective. And you want to know that it's achievable. To say that we are going to eliminate teen pregnancy in Harrison County. That's not an objective. That's not achievable. That's not realistic. It's not doable. So you have to be able to put forward an achievable objective. I've seen people say that they was go reduce teen pregnancy from, they were at 15%, and they was going to reduce it to 0. That's not realistic. Do the numbers on that and see how many you would have to do. So it has to be something that's reasonable and be able to obtain the level of change reflected in the objective. That's being realistic. And then it has to be time bound. Time bound, in what period of time will you do this? We're going to practice all of this in a minute. In what time period? Will you do it in 1 year? Will you do it in 3 years? And it's okay to say we will increase academic performance among 30% of the students over a 5-year period. I don't know if that's realistic or not, because I don't know the point from which you start. But the point is that you ought to be able to say, I'm going from here to there. Now, in order for something to be measured, you got to know from whence you are starting. Hear me clearly. In order to measure something, you got to know where you are starting from. If you say, I am going to lose 10% of my weight over a certain period of time, you got to know how much you weigh now in order to decide how much 10% is. Okay. If you are going to say just simply, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in the next 6 months. Well, what you got to do? You got to wait a day so that you'll know how much you are starting, where you're starting from. And that's a simple, basic concept. But when we write an objective, sometimes that evades us. And the point I'm trying to make is when you write objectives, you ought to know where you're starting from so that you can measure change going forward. Remember, change is not change until it is not the same. Let's look at some examples. Specify change, a specific change to be achieved as a result of the project activities. This is an example. To increase how much? By 50%. When? During the program year. The percentage of who? The parents who read to their preschool children. How you don't go know they have done that as reflected in the parent pre-post survey? Does that make sense to somebody? Let me read it again, see if we see all the elements. The objective is to increase how much by 50% when during the first program year, the percentage of for whom parents who read to their preschool children as reflected in the parent pre-post survey. To increase by 50%, you got to know how much they read it now in order to know when you reach 50%. How you gonna know that? Because you go ask them when you do the pre-test before you start the program. And you go determine your 50%, and what you discover in the pre-test, oh my gosh, only 10% of the parents are reading to their children. And I gotta increase that by 50%. So at the end of your program year, you ought to have 60% of your parents who are reading to their preschool children. That's a tall order. Am I making sense? Okay.
You're making great sense, Dr. Fletcher, and that's a great point. And I want to interject one additional question from a reviewer's, grant writer's reviewer's perspective. One of the questions on most grant applications that reviewers have to score is, does this program have an evaluation plan to measure progress and impact? If your program is young, do you have outlines for measuring impact? So that's a great point. You have to show where you're starting from and where you're trying to go and how you get in there. Great point, Dr. Fletcher. And I see a lot of comments in the chat box that's agreeing with that. So continue.
Thank you. What are the criteria? You use strong action words: increase, decrease, conduct. We not go empower, we not go emphasize, we not go do, you know, those things you can't quantify, but you can quantify conduct because you can count how many did you conduct, whatever it was. You can determine whether something decreased or increased, but you got to know where you're starting from. And of course, you only have one purpose or aim, and you have an end product that you're aspiring for. It is time specific. That's important, because you could write a grant and say, we go increase parents reading to their children, but it's gonna take us 10 years to do that. If you don't specify the time, then your funder come visit you after 1 year, and they expect you to have done what that objective said, but you didn't tell them, but it's gonna take me 10 years to do it. And again, I'm trying to emphasize the logic here. Be specific and indicate who the recipient is. Who are you doing this, directing this objective toward? Vague objectives. These are the kind you don't want to write, okay? My objective is to prepare students for a life of responsible citizenship. What does that mean? How do you know when you have done that? What students? What is their level of responsible citizenship now? So that's not an objective you want to do. It's not quantifiable. It's not time specific. And you're not, it's not specific enough. Another one, to provide students with the basic competencies to survive. Doesn't that sound nice? But it's not a viable objective. Again, because what does basic competencies to survive mean? What does it look like? That's the question I used to ask my students. What do the basic competencies to survive look like? When I was growing up, it was different from how I look now, because my grandchildren think a basic competency is having a laptop, smartphone, PC in their bedroom and all that stuff. So the point I'm trying to make is that's not specific enough. That's too vague. To enable students to develop a wholesome self-concept. What is a wholesome concept? Self-concept, what does it look like? How much do you need? When is enough enough? How you gonna develop that? And how long is it gonna take you to develop it? And to reduce the number of homeless persons. Well, thank you. You got a number in here. You say you go reduce the number. That's wonderful. You moving toward quantifying. How many do you have now? When you go do it? How long it's gonna take you to do it? Because you might not have but 5 homeless people in your community. Again, I'm being facetious, but I'm trying to make a point.
So I think this may be a good point to ask some people, but I don't know, I think Sarah may have had to drop off. If they have that compelling story, the things that you were just talking about, if you go back to that last slide, you know, do we understand what she's saying about not being vague and being more specific and granular, showing some quantitative information? Does anybody have any questions about that? And if so, please put it in the chat. I love the perspectives that you're bringing, Anthony, in terms of from a reviewer. LaCarsha, you're welcome to jump in from what's, you know, from your aspect of it to see the things that come across your desk as well. But I think that makes a lot of sense what you're doing, Anthony, is saying the specific questions and if they have very specific things. You have anything else that you want to contribute to that discussion?
Yeah, if they're writing these questions down, they are actually scoreable questions from a recent grant program that I was reviewing grants for. And so I'll touch on another one from a point Dr. Fletcher just made. And it asks, does the application report specific outcomes? Are the results impressive and meaningful given the available resources? So it's going to look at your budget. It's going to look at the partners that you collaborate with. And we're saying, given the resources, is this impressive? You've helped 10 people with no money. That's impressive, right? But I've only helped 10 people and I got a $50,000 budget. Not as impressive. And so as I'm going through these questions, these are true questions on the grant application. And I'll share one last one with you before we move on. It won't be the last one for the day, but for right now. Does the organization have a relationship with Hancock Whitney Bank? Now, specifically, that's on a Hancock Whitney program, right? We offer a comprehensive competitive grant writing program that we give away $250,000 annually. And one of the boxes, and it's just one of 11 questions, you either get 10 points or you get 0. So are you doing business with the organization that you're asking for funds? And it doesn't ask how much business, just business, period. Do you have an account with them? Have you had a loan with them? Do you have a relationship with the banker? All of these are specific. And as Dr. Fletcher was saying, you don't want to have broad, open-ended questions. You want to give some specific outcomes that will allow us to tell a story about the collaboration and how we're helping.
Okay. And we did receive some comments from Ann Alexander. I now understand why my objectives were vague. And Carmelita said, I use a SMART concept daily. So these are good affirmations. Okay. Forgive me for interrupting. But... and LaCarsha, did you want to share?
Yes, I just wanted to say, Dr. Fletcher, I think I'm taking just as many notes as the participants. You have really made some superb points. One thing that I keep hearing is be clear, be precise, be direct, don't be vague. Actually, one of the grants that I work with Federal Home Loan Bank, they always tell us to make sure we're indicating what are the funds being used for, be specific. Who am I planning to help? who will benefit from the grant if approved. So it's very important that you're very specific, be precise, be clear, be to the point, be interesting. I mean, these are some excellent points. And one thing that I do want to say, you mentioned knowing your strengths. If you are writing a grant and you have someone that has a strength in your department in one area that you may be weak, it's okay to reach out to them. Anthony and I and Ashley do it all the time. We reach out to each other, we communicate with each other, because one may be strong in an area and the other one may not be as strong. So we rely on each other, we communicate with each other so that we can come to one strong proposal when we're doing our presentation. So know your strengths, know those who labor among you, and don't be afraid to reach out. Get as much help as you can get so that you can present a strong proposal. And she mentioned having goals and objectives. Whenever you go to the doctor, you're going to the doctor because you know he can give you some help. And whenever you go to him, you're going because you're committing yourself to do whatever he asks you to do. That's following the format. Many times we have our own way of doing things, but if you're applying for a specific grant, they're giving you instructions on how to apply for that specific grant. Why? Because that's your format. So be very mindful of the instructions that are given. Follow those instructions, follow those guidelines that they're actually asking you to follow. Follow the format. It's very important. So be precise, be clear, follow the format, follow the directions. It makes a big difference.
Fantastic. Okay,
And
please resume.
I have one. Is somebody else, Angie?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I have a suggestion. For instance, the point that Anthony makes about having a relationship with the funder. If I were doing an application and for Hancock Bank and I saw that question, I would seek to answer that not organizationally first. I would tell Hancock Bank, we have X number of people in this community who use your services. And that's the most powerful statement you can give that bank. We do business with you. And we talked earlier about seeing yourself as having resources and something to offer. If the people that you are serving in your community do not use the services of Hancock Bank, and enough of them don't use it, that's going to affect their bottom line. That's called power. The point I'm making, realize what your assets are. And I would try to figure out how can, if I'm going to be going to them repeatedly for funding, etc., when we do a needs assessment, I'm going to do 2 or 3 questions. And one of them questions will be, have you ever used the banking services of Hancock Bank? Yes or no? And there I got my data to say, I can say to Hancock, we are coming to you because we have used your services. And we are asking you to be a good citizen and give back to this community. I wouldn't say it quite like that, but that's the point I would be making. You bring something to the table as a local community providing services. I don't know if that would fly, Anthony, but those are my thoughts.
Great point. And like you said, just word it a little bit, a little nicer, but but definitely great points. Continue on, Dr. Fletcher. Great job.
Thank you.
Use, when you're writing objectives, use strong verbs. Increase, decrease. You go write a curriculum. You go identify 300 students. You go establish an after-school program that consists of A, B, C, and D. You're gonna conduct 12 sex education classes for young teenagers in the community, 1 time a week for 1 hour in length. All of that you can quantify. Don't use promote, enhance, encourage, understand, accommodate. These are words I have picked out of proposals that I've reviewed. And we can't quantify relate unless you tell us what relate look like. Okay. Now, very quickly, and I'm going to be through with objectives and we're going to move on. Objectives have 5 qualities, what we've been talking about all the time. There's a desired situation that you want to address. housing, unemployment, childcare, whatever it might be. And there's a target population that you want to serve. And you will go tell them the extent of change. You go increase, decrease by a certain amount. And we go do that in a specific time frame. 6 months, 3 years, 5 years, the life of the grant. Okay. And then you go tell them how you go know when it has happened. That's the measurement. Desired situation, target population, extent of change, time frame, measure. You address those 5 things and you have a viable objective. And it's not hard to do. Let's do it. Okay. I'm going to do an example. And then you go work your own one in the space, write it out. The desired situation in the example is to increase reading performance. That's the desired situation, to increase reading performance. Who you gonna do this for? First graders at my academy. How, to what extent? How much you go increase? 50% of the participants served will experience an increase in reading performance. And this is in your packet that you're gonna, if you request it from Angie or however it gets disseminated. How long gonna take you to do this? Carmelita, how long is it gonna take you to do this, Angie? I'm gonna do it in 1 year. How you gonna know when you gonna have done? How you gonna measure what you've done? I'm gonna survey, do a teacher evaluation. I'm gonna get the students' grade reports, or I'm just gonna go online and look at the standardized test scores for children at my academy. Now, does that sound complicated? I need to hear from a participant. Hold it. Let me finish. Now, let me put this together, all the 5 pieces. Here's your objective. To increase the reading performance of 50% of the first grade program participants during the first year as evidenced by their standardized reading test score. Period.
Okay, does anybody want to pipe in? She asked for some participation. We got a note from Carmelita, says no, ma'am. Again, if y'all are muted, please let me know, because I did invite everybody to unmute. You have experts right here at your fingertips and on hand. So I would take the advantage to ask as many questions as you can, and she's asking for it. So please continue. Dr. Fletcher, I will monitor the chat and such, and somebody, if they want to raise their hand so they can get unmuted, which y'all should have the ability to do anyway, let me know.
Very well. Now, I hope while we are here or at some point after this, you will just practice doing this to increase the employment status of program participants. For who's your target population? Participants in what? Jobs for graduates, Angie. How much? We go do that for 75% of our program participants, because we've been doing this for a long time. And last year we did it for 71% of our graduates. And we will do it in 1 year by the end of this academic year. How you know you will have done it? By students' receipt of their diplomas or whatever. Or again, if you think of it as putting those 5 pieces together, you then can string together that SMART, quantifiable objective. And when your reviewer reads that, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. That's observation. Again, I know what it's now after doing this. I know what it's like to be a Baptist preacher and ain't nobody talking about it too. Any comments before I move on?
It's
I think that was Carmelita, but we're having trouble hearing you. You want to put it in the chat? Carmelita, type it in the chat.
So Dr. Fletcher, there are a couple good comments out there. This worksheet is very, very helpful for me, a newbie in grant writing. Amen. I have that comment in the chat box. And so I'm seeing a lot of people that are really enjoying the worksheets and the format of the layout. So you're doing a great job. So continue on and everything looks great.
Very well. We're moving right ahead. Deacon Anthony said we could move on. Okay, that's the end of goals and objectives. And again, I encourage you to keep this worksheet. This is how I learned how to write objectives. And when I need to write them even for a grantee now, and I'm struggling with it, I take this sheet out and it helps me to do that. Okay. Project approach. What you go do? You're playing. You got your objectives. Now, it's time for you to put all of that together and talk about your particular program, intervention, approach, project plan. They are all synonymous terms that mean essentially the same thing. And it should describe what will you do, who will do it, when it will be done. And that includes activities. You're going to offer X number of programs, activities that young people or whomever would be involved in, who the target is, where the project gonna be located. Are you gonna have multiple sites? Again, over what time frame? Talk about the project administration, the coordination of the activities, as well as the community linkages. Very quickly to step through those, what activities will take place, how often, for how long. You know, we will offer a educational enrichment program. How often? How long will it last? And what will it consist of? And who will it be? What's the age, the gender, the area of residency, the socioeconomic status of these young people? How you gonna recruit the children? If you're offering a program for you, is it just whoever show up? Are you gonna make an attempt to reach the kids who need it the most? Are you gonna reach out to the school and say, we are offering this educational enrichment program this summer to address the learning recovery? It's the learning recovery program as a result of COVID. Well, how you go get them? Well, we go start with any children that with the lowest grade performance, because we want to help the children who need it the most, etc. You need to be specific. Location, will you have multiple sites? And again, what's the beginning and the ending date? We go start 3 weeks after school is out, which is on June, and we go in on X date. Now, hopefully you're seeing throughout this, it's about being specific. Who is your project administrator? The project administration. Describe your organizational capacity. We have been doing this for the last 10 years, 20 years, forever, whatever. Who will direct the project? Who, what's the organizational structure? In terms of coordination, how will activities be coordinated? Who are the folks that you have linkages and collaboration with? We've discussed this previously. And how will you continue to sustain the program beyond funding? Real important. Your collaborators can be partners with other organizations, public schools, court systems, alcohol and drug, preschool providers, faith and community-based groups. Sustainability is an area that we often don't do as well in as we would hope. How you going to continue the funding once this grant that you're applying for ends? Well, you're gonna have a graduated process for absorbing the project into the agency's budget. For instance, if the project consists of 3 staff people, you might add 1 staff person a year over the 3-year grant. And by the end of the grant, you will have absorbed them into your agency budget. If you say, well, we can't do that because we don't have the funding, Then you go look for ways, you go tell the fund that we go look for ways of leveraging our funds. We go develop a funding plan. You just can't say, I'm gonna develop a funding plan. You go say, and we are therefore putting in place a fund development committee that is going to be chaired by our board, the chairman of our board of our organization, something like that, showing that you got something in place. You go launch a fundraising campaign, or you already have. You go look at replication by other organizations and see how they have done it, etc. These are all kinds of possibilities, if you will, in terms of looking at how others have absorbed programs into this funding. This is not the first time the agency is funding somebody that has to figure this answer out to the same issue. So you got to address sustainability. Okay, and I'm going to move.
Excellent slide, Dr. Fletcher. That's
I'm
an
gonna-
excellent slide. And before you move on, I want to just make one quick point. 2 questions. Now, each one of these questions that I'm sharing with you are scored 1 to 10. So here's 20 points right here on this slide. One of the questions asks, does this program have a good plan for sustainability and growth? That's a 10-point question. And Dr. Fletcher's giving you a slide on how to answer that right there. And the second one is this program replicable in other markets? So can I, the bank, look for other organizations across the footprint that can replicate this program and continue on to help others? Because again, we're looking for the impact of the program to be able to help as many people as we can. Excellent slide, Dr. Fletcher. Great point. Continue on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And also we then get into looking at strategies and activities. And hopefully we understand the difference between, we use these 2 words interchangeably, strategies and activities, but they are different. And I'm gonna try to give you an example, but they are the specific, I'm talking about the specific activities to be carried out in order to accomplish your objective. Strategy, to give an example, using my weight reduction example, if I have a strategy of physical fitness, that's a strategy. I have a strategy of reduced calorie intake, that's a strategy. But if I say I'm going to limit my food intake to 1,500 calories per day, that's an activity. Okay, you see the difference? If I have a strategy of fitness, then my activity would be going to the gym 3-5 times a week. Strategies is the broad area, the activity is the specific things you're going to do. Your strategy might, for teen pregnancy prevention, would be sex education, okay? And somebody else might have a strategy of abstinence, but your activity for sex education is to offer one 1-hour session 2 times a week. That's the activity. This activity might be to conduct a workshop to improve people's knowledge in a given area. That's the activity. The strategy is capacity building for that purpose, and that's how you're gonna do that capacity building. Strategies, and that's sort of nuance in it, but I think the differences are important. But most times people use those words interchangeably. As a part of your approach, you need a management plan and you need to have, for instance, they will ask you to talk about your management philosophy and your internal controls. And you said, do we have any internal controls? Of course you do. You have staff meetings, you have some fiscal controls, you got an accountant, you have to requisition, and you have staff accountability because you do a performance evaluation every year. Those are internal controls. And it can include your organizational chart, etc., indicating where this project fits in to that structure. It also includes roles and responsibilities of those key persons in the project. That's your management plan. It includes when you go do what, and that's your timeline that you develop. It provides some information on your key staff in terms of not their qualifications and their experiences that they bring to this opportunity. And oftentimes, funders will ask you to include the resume in the appendix. Here's where you talk about your capacity. You go talk about how long you've been in business, how long you've been doing this work, the constituents that you serve, how you are structured. You are a community nonprofit, or you a community collaborative, etc. And we have a diverse governing board. Is racially diverse or ethnically diverse, and you have different professions represented, and you are going to talk about what your programmatic focus, and if you're applying for funding in an area that you don't have a track record, that's where you got to explain how you're going to do that, why you are capable of doing that, and how you know you can deliver on that. The next area has to do with staffing. What are their competencies, their licensure, their certifications, and not only your staffing, but those partners. If you're going to be referring individuals to the mental health center, and that's a significant part of your program, you can talk about the capacity of the mental health center to service those individuals. What about your human and material capacity and resources? Again, we just talked about the human material. We got this new modern facility. We have computers where young people can come in, or families that do not have computers at home can come and utilize them. You talk about the resources that are available. And it might be smart to include your organizational chart. And again, I stop for any feedback before I move toward closure.
Okay, let's see what we have. Nothing. We do have requests to get the presentation for sure. And so we'll make sure that I have that one that you sent me, so and I have everybody's email address that's signed in, so we will be sure to get that.
Okay.
What do you, let me ask you this, what do you find the biggest misstep in this section for Anthony? If you can help answer that too in your review, what are people just completely and utterly missing in this organizational capacity review in their submission that you find?
My observation is a lack of specificity. You aren't being specific.
So that's your theme for the overall presentation. Be more specific.
Be more specific.
There's Ashley. Ashley, you want to contribute as to what people may be missing or what you see?
So you guys already know this is my favorite slide, right? Not that they all haven't been tremendous, and you all have done such an amazing job. I've enjoyed the entire presentation. This is where your experienced nonprofit organizations and your up and coming upstarts, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is the difference right here. And I'm not saying that it in a negative way. Please don't take it that way. This is where we have found that a lot of the organizations that we work with, some of which are partnered with Anthony along the Gulf Coast, are really missing key components of their programs. They're doing great work, right? But because of sometimes lack of staffing or just inexperience, they're running into trouble here. Being able to, as Dr. Fletcher pointed out, and I think actually a few of our panelists have pointed out between the two sessions, distinguishing between who is actually the person, for example, to structure the proposal versus the person that may be serving as the organization's key ambassador, those sorts of things, figuring out, as Sarah says, sometimes who's on first is a very big deal. And that matters when you're talking about all sorts of fund development, such as, who's responsible for the relationship with the funder, right? Maintaining, an adequate level of touch points with them and keeping in touch and making sure that the funder at all times is kept abreast of the organization's progress, for example. A lot of times from a mission and purpose standpoint, what I've seen as both a practitioner on one end and also a person reviewing on the opposite end is there's a tendency to mission creep, as they call it, where you're so busy running after funding that you forget the mission of your organization, and you begin creating programs based on funds that are available from a particular funder or in a particular metropolitan area. And that's where you run into trouble, because although it may sound like a great idea to add a new function to your current business model, what the funder is looking for is your level of experience and expertise, right? So when you're discussing creating a brand new program that nobody on the team has experience in, you're going to have an issue there. I'll never forget Anthony and I drove up to meet with him with one of the groups on the coast, and they were fairly new, though the organization had existed in some form, but they were evolving and they were asking us for a whole ton of money. I won't even say, how much it was. And I'm listening, and they were impressive, very intelligent individuals, and they're talking about these grandiose plans. And I sort of whispered to Anthony at the first moment I had, well, so who on the team is capable of doing the work they're talking about doing? Because it was something that was so far different than what they had been created to do. I think they were an advocacy group and they were talking about becoming a lender. And we're like, okay, that sounds awesome. And they're telling us all these great data points. Oh, the coast really needs opportunities for small business lending. We're like, yeah, we're all on board. But who on your team has that expertise? So again, a lot of times, just making sure that you have these key components in place and that you are sticking to who you are and what you do is just very important. So I know we're going to talk a lot about that and other related items in what I believe is our third session. I know I'm on schedule for that one, and I plan to sort of drill into some of these things, but it's just very important, even if you're a 2-member organization or a 1-person organization, to know what the responsibilities are, at your level, and the responsibilities of your board. If you guys may recall, I spoke to that the last time. Your board of directors are your best and greatest assets, right, outside of your staff, and they can provide knowledge base and expertise to help you do what you're doing, particularly if you're a smaller group. And to that point, if you're in a process of bringing on new board members, you want to pay attention to the skill gaps in your organization and on your board, so that if you're very banker heavy, you want to make sure that you have individuals that can speak to the other functions of the organization. So
as
I'll
she
stop
mentioned, she and
there,
Lakarsha are really going to be the
looking
main
forward.
presenters at the next one, because it'll get to, and Anthony, to get to the technical pieces of it. Because some oftentimes there's some technical things that people are leaving off, and speak, to that specificity needed, as well as just dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Okay.
Awesome.
So, all right, Dr. Fletcher, please resume.
And Angie, tell me, how are we on time?
We are 10:38, so we have another 20 minutes or so.
Okay, very well. I'm okay. And just in terms of what we were just talking about, I echo what Ashley is saying completely. First of all, don't compromise yourself. I have seen folks write themselves out of existence trying to please the funder. And you don't recognize the organization because they have so enmeshed themselves into being saying and doing and responding regarding what the funder wants, and you sort of lose yourself in the process. That can happen. Don't lose your identity. The other point I will make before I move on is please acknowledge any challenges, weaknesses that you foresee. I have a policy. Let me own my inadequacies before somebody else pointed out to me. Okay? Own that in an appropriate way, and don't just own it, tell them what you're doing about it. We are going to fill this gap because we are going to use consultants for the first year. Then we will gently move our staff into those roles. Have a plan. Don't just say we don't have this capacity. You need a plan and tell them up front how you're going to address that weakness within your organization or that challenge that you have that you need to make sure you cover. But own your stuff, as I say sometimes, before, because if you see it, somebody else probably will see it too when they look at your document. I'm going to shift and I'm going to really talk fast. I'm talking about budget. And the most I can say about budget is to be clear, delineate all your costs and all your sources. Make sure that your budget is consistent with the narrative. Do not, in the middle of you've written the narrative, you're going to do this youth program, and then you get to you're doing the budget and you say, oh my gosh, we're going to need transportation. And you put in the money, and I'm exaggerating it, to buy a van. But you never mention transportation as being a problem in the narrative. That's a disjoint. You need to align that and make sure what you are asking for in the budget, you can go back and put your finger on it in the narrative. There have been times when I prepared the budget justification, I put in parentheses, see page so-and-so of the narrative, so you will see where I'm asking what I'm going to do with this unusual thing I'm asking for. Quick example. Many years ago, I created a nonprofit when I retired. We had an abstinence education program. And I don't know if you all remember back then, but during the Bush administration, they had these little talking dolls that were used, anatomically accurate talking dolls that were used for abstinence education programs. So some of those were purchased in the budget. We ordered something like $150. Well, my God, when our accountant audited our books and saw them dolls, they thought we had done something crazy. But we hadn't. We were purchasing them. And when they asked us about it, we said, let us show you the dolls. Now that was the accountant picked up on that. But the point I'm making is when you write your proposal, and you got something that looks like, people might not be clear about what it is, just put something in parentheses or reference them so that they know exactly what you're talking about in terms of that's the value of having the budget narrative. So be clear, concise, and detailed. Include your justifications and be reasonable. And reasonable means ask for what you need. No more, no less. Ask for what you need. Now, we know people want to pad their budgets, and some people go to the opposite end. They ask for less in the hopes of getting the funding. I have not found that to be the case. I've had 2 instances in my early years of grant writing where the funder wanted to fund us. We had made through the reviews, and they called us and say, you need to adjust your budget. I said, oh my gosh, what can I cut? And they said, you need to, it just means you need to increase it, because we don't think you can do what you have proposed and do it well with this budget. That taught me a lesson. Ask for what you need to do the work and do it well. Because sometimes we think we have to do more with less. Okay. I'm not gonna get into all of this. There's the personnel, the categories, personnel, fringes, travel, equipment, consultant costs, individual consultants, legal fees, independent audit, data process. And I'm not gonna say you're gonna need all of those. And you have to decide, some funders will separate consultant and contractual. For instance, evaluation. I don't know if Angie's still on the line or not. She asked about evaluation. Evaluation would be a contractual. I'm sorry, Angie, the young lady from Jobs for Graduates.
I'm still
Oh,
here.
okay, then. Here's where you would address contractual services for an evaluator, I think is what you asked about. And you would break that out in there. There's some guidance, Angela, in terms of how you cost that. And that can be discussed separately. Usually your funder will give you guidance. I just worked on something last week. Oh, I know, 21st Century. They have a cap. You cannot commit more than 10% of your yearly budget to evaluation. Okay. And usually funders will have some kind of guidance that they provide you regarding that. That's a contractual service. Now, the larger discussion is, what do you look for in an evaluator, etc. And part of the end of this presentation, I don't have time to go into it today. We do a whole section on what to look for in an evaluator and how do you make sure that you are driving the evaluator and not somebody who's never seen your program, don't know you, don't know your community, but they are going to do an evaluation for you that you might want to have an approach, Angela, that's much more participatory, where you and we help individuals when we do evaluations is to ask the right questions. And we can have a sidebar regarding that, because most of the work that we do, honestly, is in the area of evaluation. Now, you're going to have communication costs, whatever those are in terms of telephone, postage, printing, reproduction, etc. One place where nonprofits come short is that they do not have an indirect cost, usually because they aren't getting enough funding to have negotiated that indirect cost with the cognizant federal agency. And that's a process that an accountant or some such financial individual has to go through for you. And if you are not getting a large amount of a large amount of grants, be they federal, state, or foundation, it might not be worth your time to do it. But as you get larger grants, you might want to do that. For instance, I finished last month writing a grant for 1.8 million for a school district that did not have a negotiated indirect cost rate. Well, they gave up essentially almost $200,000 that they could have gotten in indirect costs, but they didn't have a rate, so they couldn't get it. But if you're not a larger organization, that might not be an issue for you at this point. We talked about being precise. We follow the agency's format and make sure it's related to your activities. Have a fiscal person to review it. And I'm going to summarize everything else by saying use a spreadsheet. I will not put a budget into a grant if it's a fully developed grant unless the budget has been developed using a spreadsheet, because I don't have time to do all those mathematical calculations. I let the spreadsheet do it. That's the safe way. And you know your totals go be right. In the early days, people would do budgets and that math didn't calculate. That's no longer an excuse. And we cannot afford to submit a proposal where we have not added the money up right. Because if we can't add it on before we get it, that says something about what might happen when we get it. So it's important. I encourage do it in spreadsheet format. I got few minutes left. I am not going to deal with this in detail, but logic models, somebody asked about that the other week.
Yes.
Logic models are not a rocket science, but it is an invaluable tool to use when you are running a program, writing a program, as well as evaluating a program. A logic model is an enlargement of a theory of change. And the theory of change defines how and why an initiative works. That's all it is. It says why what I'm doing is going to work. For instance, if Betty wants to lose weight, I have a theory. If I go to that gym and back up from the table, that's my theory. I'm gonna lose weight. So that's the theory of change. If I don't back up from the table and if I don't go to the gym, it doesn't work. Now, and then you go on to develop, I'm skipping that, to develop a logic model. And a logic model is an expanded chart that summarizes everything we've talked about here today and the last time in very few words. It's where you chart a problem and you link it to what resources you need, what specific activities you will utilize, the evidence of the expected outcomes, and how you measure. Everything we've talked about before, remember the objectives, those are the things that are captured in a logic model. Now, they got a language that goes with that. What's the situation? The situation is the issue of the problem being addressed. Housing, teen pregnancy, whatever the case, unemployment, whatever the issue might be, poverty. And they ask you for inputs. Inputs is another word for resources. So I just said resources. Your outputs are simply strategies or activities. And I used the example before, and a strategy would be conflict resolution. An activity for that strategy would be 12 one-hour sessions on handling conflict. An indicator would be the evidence of the outcome. In my weight example, my indicator is pounds lost, inches lost, okay? And my outcome is the results. What's changed? My weight has decreased or increased. If I get on the scale and I've been doing this for 2 months and my weight has either not changed or gone up, that tells me that this theory is not working. Some ain't right. Okay, that's just a simple explanation. Now, so it's a picture, you all. It's a picture. It's a picture of a program where you link the relationship between what you put in, that's your resources, what you do, your output, and what you get as a result, which is the outcome. As my grandbaby used to say when he was a little boy, he said, "Grandbaby, it don't get no good than that." So it don't get no good than that, y'all. Pardon the grammar.
Great
The point is inputs, outputs, outcomes. That ain't nothing but if you give me this money, this is what I'm gonna do, and this is what you will see as a result. That's a logic model.
That is wonderful. And that's why I came back on camera just a second ago, because this was the biggest question that came out of the last one. So please continue. I just wanted to give you an 8-minute warning.
Thank you. I need that. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with that. Okay. Think of a logic model this way. You start with a problem at the bottom of the stairs. You got your goals and objectives. Next, you got your inputs, which are resources. Then your output, which are activities. Your indicators, which is the evidence that this thing is working. And here is the top of the stairs. You see the result. If something is not happening going up these stairs, you're not going to get to the top. Okay? Skipping a lot of stuff. You can use it many ways. It has many benefits. It has some limitations. Let me give you another quick example. You start out with a problem over here to the left, a problem or a situation. And you put some resources. Finder, give me some resources, some inputs in the form of money or human capital, whatever. And I'm going to give you some outputs, some strategies, some activities. And we go see this as a result of this and this. Just that simple. Let's practice it real quick. You got a headache and you get a pill. What's that? Somebody tell me. Can somebody tell me? Anybody? This is your resources. This is your input. Thank you. This is your input, your resources. You get the pills. Well, what is taking the pills? That's your output. That's your activity. Your activity. That's what you do. Because if you get these pills, these resources, and you don't take them, you're not gonna get no outcome. What's the outcome? Your headache gone. And people don't. There's another level here that I won't get into. This is the outcome. The impact is you return to work and you're not making everybody in the office mad because you're affecting other people then. What's the point I'm trying to make? Here is the situation. You got a headache. You get some pills. You can write and get all the funding you want to. If you do not use it in terms of the strategies and activities as you propose to do, which is taking the pill, you will never get to your outcome, which is to not have a headache. I hope this makes sense in a simplistic way. So
Excellent example.
we know what the problems can be: literacy, crime, drug abuse, etc. And we know what the inputs can be: equipment, material, money, partners. Partners are an invaluable input. Staff, technology, time, volunteers. Indicators is simply the evidence that you're moving in the right direction. If you are offering a youth leadership development program and you're offering 5 sessions a week, and you only have 2 children at the session, you know something's wrong with the evidence. You're not going where you're trying to go. The evidence is, those indicators are important. I'm gonna try to get to the exercise here and walk you through this. Examples: weight reduction as indicated by, that's the end, we go into the indicator. Pounds lost. How you gonna measure pounds lost? By bathroom scales. Well, that wouldn't be a good one for me because my scales I cheat on my scales, but you get the point. Weight reduction is your situation. The indicator is pounds lost, but your measurement of pounds lost is my bathroom scales. Marital distress. What's an indicator of marital distress? Is fighting, okay? You got an alcohol problem. What's an indicator? Your BAC level, as measured how? By a breath test. Indicators mean an indication that an indication of the desired outcome, where you're trying to go and how you're measuring it. Let me move to and again, here we go. Now I'm not gonna walk through this. I'm just gonna have to give you some examples. This is the form that I use. This will, it's in the packet that you'll get. Your input, and I put under that parenthesis resources. Then your strategies and activities, which is, we talked about that, your performance indicator, your measurement, and your outcome. And you do this for every objective. See objective up there? You do this page for every objective. Your outcomes can be short-term or long-term. That's for an advanced class. Here's one that's completed. What we invest: staff, volunteers, time, money, equipment. What we do: we offer workshops, we do counseling, we do assessments, Who do you reach? Participants, customers, citizens. This is the shorthand version. And what changes? We go increase people's awareness, we go increase their knowledge, and we go measure that by some means, etc., etc. And then you get real fancy doing logic model. I encourage people to keep it really simple. If we had the time, we would actually work through one of these. I encourage you, all you got to do is list here your input. What activities are you gonna provide? How do you know? And you know it's an indicator by you can say the number of attendees, the change in grades, students' grades, all of those kind. Usually an indicator will be a number, a percent. It will be something you can count. The number of sessions offered, the number of participants in a session. How will you know that? Well, we're gonna have people sign in and count the number of people attended. And my outcome is going to be a restatement of whatever that objective is that's up there. And I'm feeling really inadequate because I haven't talked about objectives. Objectives
I'm just-
is.
I just want to, I'm going to say what I said last time to those that participated, that, you know, we are at time. I think it's been wait a minute. Well, don't lose your spot, because
Keep your spot, Dr. Fletcher. We're gonna stay on.
because I want to tell people, I completely understand if you need to leave. We want to be respectful of your time, but we're going to keep it rolling because we are recording. I actually already have the my email set to go with Dr. Fletcher's presentation, and I can render this and send out the recording so you all can fast forward to anything that you feel like you may lose. I know I may lose some panelists as well, but we did this the last time, and we actually, you know, there's always the magic after the presentation where people kind of open up. So if you have the time and you get to a spot where you feel comfortable stopping, Dr. Fletcher, please don't feel rushed. And that, you know, we won't go too far gone, but please get to a place where you're comfortable stopping, and especially with that logic model, because that was really the biggest ask the last time. So if you wanted to, you know, just look over those slides again and see if there's something else that you want to cover, and if not, we can wrap it up.
Okay, I just want to emphasize the outcome, because that's the last column on your logic model. Is outcome. So what is an outcome? You all, it's the desired result. Outcome is the desired result. That's what it is. It is the expected change. If you are doing a program that increase students' reading proficiency, your desired outcome is students that are reading at or above level, perform at proficiency level. It's really stating the same information in a different way. So outcomes is not rocket science. It's simply stating what change do you expect to see when you have done the right thing in your program. Those changes, those outcomes can be long-term, it can be short-term. That means usually you change in attitudes, knowledge, behavior, skills. Those are usually short-term. What we see in long-term is conditions. There's less poverty, more employment. Those are changes in condition. It takes longer to change a condition than it does to change somebody's knowledge level or their behavior. Outcomes. You don't have to have no certain number of outcomes. What is logical for your program? And I encourage you to take the form that's in the packet that you'll get and practice doing this. The ways the outcomes are outcomes specified in the performance standards are measured are your indicators. Indicators are what you are going to measure in order to know that you're getting your outcome. In order for me to get my desired outcome of weight reduction, I am going to measure the number of pounds lost, the number of inches lost, my overall feeling of well-being or whatever, okay? Indicators are what you are doing, what you are going to measure. Measures are how you are going to measure the indicator. Okay, cyclical thinking. There that form is, I recommend to you to just spend some time practicing, play it, ball it up, put it in the garbage when it doesn't come out right. Keep doing it until you perfect it. These are some examples of logic models. And I don't know if I know this is in your packet. I don't know if all of these are. And if, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, my time is forspent. Evaluation, I'm not in the business of making program staff evaluators. I said, hire you a good evaluator, and they will address all of those issues related to that. And look for folks who are committed to the work that you are doing. I thank you for your time and your patience. Thank you, Angie and Anthony.
I gotta give you a round of applause on that, Dr. Fletcher. And I hope you saved a few slides and can join us on part 3 of the series. This is excellent information. I'm seeing some great comments in the chat box. And what really is impressing me is I'm seeing some organizations on the call that actually have great grant writing expertise. Some of them that we've funded, and some of them have won several grants. Specifically, I'm gonna give a shout out to Mr. Carl Dillon from Urban Restoration Enhancement Corporation. This guy has a great program over there with great sustainability. They've won grants over the last 5-6 years, and he's on the call gaining some excellent information here. Thank you for joining us, Carl. Thank you, Ms. Wendy Williams from Bogalusa Rebirth, another great organization that wins grants. Ms. Paula Pete was on from Family Resources of New Orleans. All of these organizations have great grant writers, but they're participating. We have a lot of new folks on as well. We appreciate you joining us. And if you have any questions for Dr. Fletcher, give them to us. We're gonna get together as a group of panelists to decide how we're gonna have that last wrap-up series. And I'm sure hopeful that our key presenters and Dr. Fletcher and Ms. Sarah Taylor can have us some wrap-up key points for that final session. But this has been a great workshop. It's exceeded my expectations, and I hope you guys will get some great information from it. So thank you all.
Dr. Fletcher wants to say something.
Yes, I just need to ask that the slides that you will receive, they are for your purposes only. It's a working process. I'm developing a guide regarding grant writing, so they are not available for broad, for distribution or sharing with others. I ask that you just use it for your purposes in your particular area of work, because it is not in final form yet, as I plan on releasing it for a general public release and possible publication.
Yeah, and to that point, Dr. Fletcher, I've already converted them to a PDF that I'll send to Angie, and we'll send them out in PDF format.
I have that.
And also, if you've done it, okay, good deal. So yeah, we'll share them in PDF format, and hopefully at the end, we may be able to recap and get some slides from across the 3 series to send out. So I'd like to hear from any of the participants that may want to chime in and have questions. Please unmute yourself and please share the discussion.
We still
Our
have
panelists.
quite a few on. I'm doing an ask to unmute for everybody. Any last thoughts from the panelists? I can't be sure if folks are. We have
This is-
okay. There we go.
Hello.
Miss Wendy.
We can hear you.
This is Marlena Dorman with Bogalusa Rebirth and Miss Wendy Williams. Miss Wendy Williams. We just wanted to say how much we enjoyed the presentation, and thank you so much for everything.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Okay, well, give me till the end of the day to like I said, render this, and I have it populated for the presentation. But let me just go ahead and send it out all at the same time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap. Thank you all. Have a blessed day. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. You did a wonderful job.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
You had no technical support and went through all those slides. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You did fine.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great information.